Gas prices hit an all-time high this year, with the price that we pay at the pump skyrocketing to an average of over $5 a gallon, with some parts of the country like California being even as high as almost $7 a gallon. While oil markets are incredibly complicated and world events can have a huge impact, I believe that oil prices may be near a peak and could start coming down soon. First of all, we have to understand how we got here. And to do that, let's start with this graph of historic oil prices by week for the past 50 years. What's striking about this graph is how oil prices have fluctuated both up and down over the years. Those fluctuations are most often caused by big world events. There was the Arab oil embargo of 1973, the Iran-Iraq War in 1980, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990 and Desert Storm after, 9/11, the global financial collapse of 2008, and then most recently the Russian invasion of Ukraine. All of these events impact supply and/or demand and are unpredictable. But let's take another look at that graph, because there is a major factor that can tell us what's going to happen, something that we can predict. Now in this graph, I have highlighted areas which represent recessions. A recession is when the economy shrinks instead of growing. What's interesting here is that you can see that in almost every case, oil prices were high going into the recession, and then as a recession kicks in, there's less economic activity overall and less need for oil, and that creates a drop in demand. And with that drop in demand, oil prices also tend to fall. We are in one of those times now. Oil prices are very high, and with interest rates rising, many people think that the entire world is about to head into a recession. Added to that is the saying that the cure for high prices is high prices, meaning that when gas gets expensive, people change their habits. They drive less to try to conserve gas. They may not take that road trip because it's too expensive. And if the high prices go on for too long, they will make more drastic changes like buying electric or hybrid vehicles. All of those activities and changes in consumer habits reduce the demand for oil, and that can have a huge impact on oil prices. So if we do enter a recession like most people think we will, gas prices will probably fall due to that lower demand. That isn't all that's going on, however. Unlike most other commodity markets, oil markets are heavily manipulated by companies, governments, and especially OPEC. OPEC stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It was founded in 1960, and it currently has 15 member countries and controls about 80% of the world's oil reserves. They get together from time to time to make changes in how much oil they produce. If they increase production, that will increase supply and lower prices. If they decrease production, that will decrease supply and raise prices. A good example of that was back in 2009. Gas prices were very low at the time as a result of the Great Recession, and that led to a decrease in demand for oil overall. So what OPEC did was to cut production by 4.2 million barrels a day. That reduced the supply of oil overall, and as a result, oil prices increased. There are times, however, when they have acted a bit differently. Around 2010, there was an oil boom in the US. This wasn't regular oil, but it was shale oil. Most oil is extracted in a crude liquid form from oil wells on land or in the ocean, but shale oil is a little bit different. It's extracted from rock that has oil trapped inside. The thing about this kind of oil, however, is that it is much more expensive to extract than the regular oil, which means that if the price drops too low, it's not worth the cost. So in 2015, OPEC saw that oil prices were going down due to the additional supply of oil from shale oil operations, and determined that it would be in their best interest, their best long-term interest, not to cut production. Their hope was that as oil prices went down and the price was lower, that companies who were extracting that shale oil would go out of business because of the low prices. And that's exactly what happened. Here is a graph of oil rigs in the US during that time. Now you can see that starting in 2010, the number of oil rigs in the US just exploded. But starting in 2015, the number of oil rigs crashed. This was a direct result of OPEC's decision to keep production high, which kept the oil prices low and put a bunch of those US shale oil companies out of business. So why does any of that matter? Well, here's the deal. OPEC wants to get as much money as they possibly can from the oil that they sell. But they can't charge too much, because then people will start looking for alternatives. Either alternative supplies of oil like oil shale, or alternatives to oil altogether like electric cars. And that's where we find ourselves today. How many of you are limiting how much gas you use because of the high prices? I think we all do it. There's also another challenge here, and that is what to do about Russia. Russia supplies a ton of oil to the world, especially Europe. Most of Europe is trying to wean themselves off of Russian oil because of the war in Ukraine and the unreliability of Russian supply. Now, it's going to take time to really get away from Russian oil entirely, maybe even 10 years or more, but that is a disastrous proposition for OPEC because it means that people are going to be trying to move away from oil. If people invest more in renewable energy and move away from fossil fuels on a large scale, that represents a huge long-term loss to them, both politically and economically. So while it hasn't happened yet, I believe that OPEC will take steps to ensure that the price of oil comes down. Just enough so that alternatives look much less attractive and to ensure that people continue to buy their oil. So that's it. Oil prices will come down for two reasons. First, the recession will lower demand, thereby decreasing prices, and OPEC will take steps on the supply side to make sure that gas prices don't go so high that people look for alternatives and move away from their oil. Now, when that's all going to happen, I don't know. We may have to struggle with high prices for the next little bit, but hopefully those prices come down soon. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree? Is there something that I'm completely missing? Be sure to add a comment and let me know your thoughts. Also, thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, check out one of these other great videos, and I'll see you in the next one.